All right, I am super excited to have Megan Smith here. Technically, my former boss too, which is
Oh,
awesome.
DJ.
My friend and boss, and
Teammate forever.
we'll tell some stories about these things. But I just want to give you a little bit of background first, because I think it's always helpful for why I respect and love Megan so much. So first, if I was to literally cover Megan's background, it would be more like a movie because there's actually been movies about Megan made, which we'll talk a little bit about. That's how awesome she is. But just to give you a little bit about her background, she grew up in Buffalo, New York, which I found one of the most important things for me to realize is how much your background impacts you and where you live and getting to know people in different areas around the country. And so she always brought this unique ability to pull in these other areas. She did her undergrad and master's works at MIT in mechanical engineering. She co-founded the MIT Solar Car, which designed one of the first solar cars and raced across the entire continent of Australia, about 2,000 miles, 2,000, 3,000 miles. Uh, but it was a record at the time, so it was pretty amazing. She also was at General Magic, one of the early smartphones, and that the movie out there is actually called General Magic. If you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend it. You will see a ton of people in there, including Megan, who are all the people who have built some of the most seminal technologies out there. The predecessor to the smartphone, much of the influence of the iPhone came from there. The designers actually came from General Magic. And Megan was key to thinking about how and the design of all of that. She was CEO of Planet Out, an early online media community. She raised over $30 million in venture funding, so she's been also in industry. She was one of the early people at Google, and she led like some of the key acquisitions that enabled things to happen. So if you know Keyhole, some of you might know its modern incarnation that came out of Keyhole, which is called Google Maps. Google Maps exists because of the work that Megan did with that team. There's Where to Tech that became Google Photos. So that was another key one. And then she was also that led the business development side of engineering, which kind of led to more almost Google's a decade of products, like where you saw everything from Gmail to all the other things. And then she also led Google.org, the philanthropic arm of Google, for several years. I got to know Megan through that world at Google. And then when we were all being interviewed for being the US CTO, they tried to keep us all separate from each other, Megan, Alex McGilvery, and myself. And we are like, oh, look, there's Megan. And she's interviewing for this job too by the chief of staff of the White House. And we were all great friends. And Megan, correctly by President Obama, was chosen to be the third US CTO and assistant to the president, which means she took her orders directly to the president from the president. And she changed the trajectory of the country through that. She will get into many of the programs there, but she was also created the role of the U.S. Chief Data Scientist. They kind of said, "Hey, we want all of you in there. Megan help figure out and make it happen." And she has awards, lots and lots and lots of awards that are all incredibly well deserved. So, Megan, thank you for being here and talking to this incredible cohort of participants. This is kind of like, as Megan knows, this is like fully in line with the way we did things in the White House of coming up with these kind of harebrained ideas and then just pulling them off and making things happen. For those that saw Summer of Code or National Day of Civic Hacking or any of these things, Megan was instrumental in making those happen. So, Megan, I first want to start with your journey, and because I think everyone sees someone like you and thinks like, wow, that's incredibly unconventional. I could never do that. And so I want you to kind of talk a little through why you made the choices that you did along this journey, because it seems kind of wild.
Yeah. Hi, DJ, it's great to see you and Kathy, Genevieve, everybody, and everybody online. I can't see you, but I can see some people in the chat. Maybe say where you are. I know one of my
46 states, 47
yeah,
states, and one and DC.
amazing. I'm here in DC. You know, life's a team sport, and I'm really proud of everybody who signed up for this adventure. I could call it, it's kind of a class, kind of a workshop, kind of a thing. Um, we all learn by doing things, and I'm really thankful that DJ, you, Kathy, the team for pulling together this. So, you know, and also my path, which you were just talking about, is very much related to a lot of the amazing people that I got to meet and sort of, oh, that's a thing. And so it taught me, oh, I could, maybe I could do something like that. Maybe. So I'm really happy that also as part of this program, you've got each other. You're going to meet different people. It sounds like later in the week, you guys are kind of pitching your ideas, and maybe somebody doesn't have an idea, so maybe you're going to hear an idea you want to join. Uh, and then also hearing people who like us who've been doing this for a while. I sometimes call it the Taylor Swift eras tour of life. Like there's all these different, albums or sections of time. And I began, as you said, in Buffalo, and Buffalo's on the Great Lakes. It's near Niagara Falls. It's an industrial town, very famous for the Erie Canal, which kind of opened up the country like a century and a half ago for shipping out and for shipping in through the lakes and waterways, and then steel and sort of the Rust Belt world. And when I was a kid, the river was on fire and the Great Lakes were dying. And so,
People may
uh,
not here know why was it on fire.
because it was super polluted, and Cleveland also had the same problem. And so, we all face great challenge, each of our generations. You can kind of look through time. We're in this, like, I don't know, people call it the fourth or fifth industrial revolution or something, but you just think about these different times and all the challenges people have faced. And as a generation, you have to step up, and people are doing crazy things and problematic things. You have to push back, and so it's which part of those problems, opportunities, etc., are you going to step into? And I was really lucky because I went to this really cool school in the city, it's public school, and it was designed by our teachers, and it had been created, a bunch of those schools, out of lawsuits that other people had stepped up and said this city's not integrated enough and had jammed for much more capable schools across. And so our teachers got to design our school. They didn't have a lot of budget like public schools, but they pulled it together. And so the key for me that has to do with tech, and I know people in this group are going to do all different kinds of, some people probably will write a play, somebody might make a startup, whatever you guys do. Some people might make a movement. For us, it was STEM related. So we were asked to do science fair in high school, actually starting in middle school, and it was a requirement for every kid in the school. And the thing that was different about the approach from our teachers was they had us not just quickly think of a project, but they had us really think about things we cared about and then think about how could we apply, what could we do about that thing that might be science and technology related. And so I started working on all kinds of green energy stuff. So solar and wind, and I did a solar distiller and then a windmill and was creating hydrogen, which is funny because my
This is
youngest son was
before green was cool.
yeah, it was before Green was cool. Though I got to tell you, Green was pretty cool because the president at the time, was you remember Taylor Swift era too. I've been around a while. I was President Carter, and he was putting solar panels on the White House. And so again, you get it, like you guys will look around, you'll get an inspiration from somewhere, and a lot of times there's things we're going to talk a little later. I know DJ, you said about Scout and Scale. A lot of times we say, oh, there's a problem. We look down. We're like, what are we going to do? And my theory is Scout, like look up. Oh, look at what that person's doing. Oh, maybe I could maybe do that here. Maybe I could adapt that. So scout, look for things that are already working. I call them the positive deviants. What might be a prototype that already exists or something you could build on? And at the time, there's no internet. So I got on the bus.
Wait,
We
wait,
were
just hold on for that second, Megan, because I think this is really important. Let's say a little bit more about positive deviant.
positive deviant. So positive deviant just means actually this whole class is a positive deviant. Okay, so what happens is we don't know what to do about the fact that it's hard to get internships right now. It's hard to get summer jobs. It's hard to get different things. And we want young people, all people, to have a broad range. People might be doing a job in an area right now. You're making some money this summer, but you had wanted to work in a different area and you couldn't get that. And so this class showed up because you all decided to do something about that and create an opportunity for people to tap into this, whether they're real time or listening to videos later or whatever they're doing. So it's do something. Who colleagues of ours said it's better to, I forget who said that's it's better to light one candle than sit in the dark. So you're looking for a candle that's lit, and there's 8 billion people. So I think of them as 8 billion colleagues. Somebody somewhere has already figured out something that solves or is an insight or something critical for what I'm doing. And if I can find them and I can help them, then that thing will happen in a more positive way. So for me, that spark, maybe there are lots of different sparks. When I was younger, my mom started the Bicycle Club for Western New York and organized stuff on the first Earth Day. We were little kids riding our bikes and thinking about commuting and green. My dad was part of creating the recycling center and doing a lot of stuff for integration and lots of cool stuff. So good role models of local active work, and I encourage everybody get involved in your community and some, but choose the things you're interested in. You don't have to work on everything. There's limited time. So for me, I end up doing these projects, and it taught me, like I said, we didn't have the internet, so I got on the bus and I went down to downtown to the library. So we had this many, the bookshelf instead of the two books about solar at the time, and I just started to get what is key. It's a practice of gaining your confidence, like the practice of learning about something and being like, oh, that's really interesting, and trying to understand it, whether it's a science idea or a policy idea or a way somebody's working or an art, some way to influence culture and art or a storyline. What are those insights? What can you learn about the literature or the existing stuff? And then you could begin to build on it. You could be understand what are the limits here? What could be different? What could I add? So you're gaining your confidence of understanding the field, and then you're practicing iterating on kind of design thinking. What do people need? What might work, etc. And it's something that will build your confidence because everyone can do this. Everyone can do invention, everyone can do writing, these things. So that's something good. So we were able to do that. The other thing I think was really fun was they required us to do a lecture demonstration. So a lot of times at science fair you make posters, but they made us go stand in front of judges and pitch and answer questions. And that was fun and hard. And it was also a teamwork because there were other kids doing the same kind of stuff. So early on, I think those are sort of roots of practicing exploring, practicing solving. I got to do the commencement address for MIT in 2015. And the motto for MIT is mind and hands, like very much second industrial age, the American century, right? Think of the Gilded Age. We're needing more people, more Americans trained. And so they found these universities. So MIT is a land grant. So there's a university, a cousin university in every state. And the idea was we needed people with agricultural knowledge, technical knowledge, and skills so that we could have the opportunity of the country that we had. And so mind and hands. And I said that, and I had learned this from Professor Williams, who was my professor, this idea of heart, that actually technology in its greatest form is about love. Love in the form of joy and curiosity and like, wow, chlorophyll, what's that? How does this work? How does the world work? Oh, we're going around the sun? Discovery, right? The second one of three that I sort of pilot is ingenuity or engineering or doing something with that knowledge, like a solar panel with President Carter, or photovoltaic, or if it's water, which was the one he was doing. And then the third one is teamwork, like how we work together across the disciplines. One of the challenges all of the young people have is that we need to learn stuff in bite sizes. So we separate the courses at school and we ring bells between them, but the universe doesn't do that. So learning to respect cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary work and doing that together, that's technology in its greatest form is about those kinds of experiences and interdisciplinary. And so the headline for me was getting the chance to do that as a young person and having encouragement from people. And the people didn't need to be technical. They were just like, let's go. Let's do something interesting.
Mhm. Where did you get this confidence from? Like and because and the question behind that question here is I think a lot of people especially now, you apply to hundreds, if not thousands of things, and all you get is rejections.
Yeah, it's
You
really
go through
hard.
this process of trying to get into college, and it's just a grind, and you're just you get, you're constantly getting beat down. But something that I've always admired you, Megan, is that you're fearless. But how did you develop that fearless nature as and what your advice to students to build that muscle?
I think it depends um it depends on who you are a little bit, not that how you would do it. So everyone can do it is my point, but that how you might do that. So um when my kids were younger, one of them was more outgoing, like our mayor, and one of them would rather go with him and then meet the people, and then he was all in. So if you are a person who is, just might talk to someone in an elevator, you might like you just do that. That's a good idea. Ask questions, be part of stuff. If you're someone who doesn't feel comfortable with doing that, find some teammates and go together to do that. And don't just spend time only with chatbots. Find real people. Um, because there's that Roald Dahl quote about magic, like the greatest things are hidden, and you come across them in the world, and so you can use the internet to do some research, but then go find the people somehow, and maybe for people like you guys are talking about, maybe you haven't figured out your project. Maybe your project is actually an exploration project. You're going to explore, maybe you're going to research all the something types of resources or the breadth of resources or specific things that are available in my community. And I'm going to make that available to other people in some way, like just an expedition as a project is a legitimate project to build, and then have some way but make a way to express it so that you can share it. So you did build something out of that. I don't know how that might look like a video. It might look like a list online, a doc or whatever you're sharing. And you might even get other people to pull into that. So anyway, I don't know if I'm answering the
No,
competency.
you are. Well, let me
It's,
give it like I'll tell a quick story,
yeah.
and that I remember is there were cabinet meetings in the White House, so the president has, and we weren't always invited to a seat at those cabinet meetings because they didn't. Even if you're assistant to the president, only certain number of chairs, and there was those things. And but Megan had figured out that this is where everyone meets and hangs out before the cabinet meeting. Like cabinet members are regular people too. They're got to wait for the president, and so everyone's just waiting outside a room. And so Megan figured out how to, and I thought this, I was like, she's like, somebody told me this, and I was like, Megan's going to do what? She's going to basically hack her way into the cabinet meeting.
But
And I
we
was,
we actually we got in, but we
you got
hadn't been
in,
invited.
but
But the point was to just go. Your point is, if there's a whole bunch of people meeting somewhere and you're allowed to go there, go there. Take the time to go 15 minutes, go an hour early, be there, and you'll be able to have conversations with people. And remember that you can ask questions of them. You have a lot to offer to other people. You may not think you do, but you do. And so just go and practice it. And I know you thought a little bit of some of these practices. I had a swimming coach. He said practice makes permanent, which is like what you do is what you do. So
Mhm.
that means what you do, you should practice. In this particular case, those who are athletes or doing things, a dance or whatever, as a swimmer, you need to hit that wall so that you touch, and you win the race or not. And the difference between one person hitting it before it could be a lot. So learning how to practice at the end of your thing to come in fast and not just kind of float your way into the end of a practice swim. It means that every time if you're doing that, it becomes habit. So you can think about things that you're doing. Practice makes permanent. So the practice of putting yourself in a place where you're being really respectful, but also available and listening and asking questions is a very valuable thing to do. And so maybe I have an assignment, which is Sergey Brin, who's one of the founders of Google, said that he always people were really nervous a little bit later in the company when we were doing a lot of things. And he's like, people were like, are we doing balloon internet or search? Are we doing Gmail? Are we doing YouTube? What are we doing? And so he said, well, we're doing things in a proportional structure, 70, 20, 10. 70% at that time of what we were doing as a company was search and advertising and all the things related to search. 20% at that time were things that were emerging and growing, like our email platforms and Google Suites and YouTube and those things. Mapping is really part of search. It's geo search. And then the 10% was we're doing kind of crazy stuff. We don't know what it's going to be, but we've got to explore. So maybe you guys can also think structurally of the summertime, 70-20-10. Maybe 70% of your time is going to be on what you want to build and design and do. 20% of your time is on other real things like coming to these seminars and working with each other, maybe helping on someone else's projects. If it gets bigger, then maybe your 70 became a two-part. And then 10% of miscellaneous, you don't know what's going to happen. And so that's part of your expedition. And so maybe every day or a couple times a week, some people might be having a job while they're doing this, so they may not have time for as much of that. So part of your job is that exploration, right? Or part of your job is your 70. So anyway, you can explore around and really try to see what's out there. Again, scout and scale, because there's a lot more resource than we think all around us. And the more we know about that, the better.
I love that because one of the things we were talking about yesterday is that everyone practices. People don't realize how much, like we were talking about, like even the State of the Union, the amount of practice and prep that goes into it. It's not like it's just an improv thing. The amount of detail and time and getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I'm wondering if you give a lot of people advice, you've given me advice, you've given students advice. What's that advice that you're giving them now in this time of kind of so much uncertainty with technology, economics, all of these different things? What's the advice that you're giving them that you find yourself often giving them?
I think again, teamwork is one. There's a couple different things, but I say teamwork just to tap into. You talk about the State of the Union. Um, whatever president's going to be doing their State of the Union, they have ideas of what they're going to say, what they want to do. They're framing it, but the team is feeding into that. And so the actual paper itself, as the speech is written, or even as the inputs are going in, there's a broad call for what kinds of things can be in here. So the speech writing team, the speechwriter is working with the president who's going to deliver that on what they want to include and not include and why, and structuring it in different ways. So, you think so it's like this team sport again, right? So I think navigating involves, again, not just talking to a chatbot, like talking to each other, and finding ways to see what's out there and what possibilities are there and asking for help. A lot of times, like finding jobs, finding roles, figuring out cool clubs to be part of if you're in school, or what class to take and why, or even if you have set of classes that are required, what things should you know going in? Those are all through conversations with people. That's incredibly valuable. And that's true also as you're building at work. I happen to have some early smartphone examples right here. So this is an early device. This is so old technologies. There's the way to plug into the actual phone line, and flip down. And this was what eventually became USB. This is an earlier standard. It was called Magic Bus. But this kind of a device, this was when we were making reference designs. This was from Sony. And this one's from Motorola. You remember the flip phones? This is a flip smartphone. So it flips and it's wireless, fancy. And you can flip down the little device connectors and things. So this is things like this. And in fact, the design and the drawing looked like this at the time, which is kind of amazing that in 1989 someone drew this and Susan Kare created all these graphics. But that, you know, how did we end up doing this? It was through ideas that started. Mark Peratt, who was our CEO, started thinking about, this information age. And what if you had a device that you could bring with you that would kind of bring all the stuff on your desk? It would connect you to people. It would have content. You could maybe do commerce, this idea of a cloud and apps and devices connected. So the way that we ended up doing that was through collecting people who knew different parts of that, just like an orchestra. So you're not going to ask your violin player to play the drums. unless like you're in an emergency and so you can temporarily play the drums. And you also want it like a symphony. You don't want half of the team. This relates to you and I, DJ. The technical people often in government, for example, were in another. You want with percussion in another building. You want it right there playing together, right? So I think teamwork maybe might be the sort of headline to have for people. Be in conversation, and that also helps you, like this getting rejected a lot, that's great suffering. The Dalai Lama once said, one way to alleviate great suffering is to know you're not alone. And so a lot of people are facing these things. And so how do we together try to solve that? And in this case, as an example, make your own solution to it. And it might turn out that by building something, you guys, this summer, you may find some organizations near you who didn't even know they needed the thing that you're building. And so if you show up and tell them right away, they might say, well, yeah, okay, I'm kind of busy, but that's a cool idea. See you later. But if you show up with something you can show and tell, and they're like, oh, how did you do that? There might be a path in that way. So you're bringing sort of something to offer.
Mhm. What when you think about these projects and you kind of explore, do you have a rubric of how you think about what projects are interesting? And like, how do you decide? Because your knack and track record of picking things, I think people would go, how does she always pick the right thing? They don't always realize how many things times we pick the wrong things.
We pick so many things. The whole movie General Motors is actually a movie about failing. That this little device company, like back in this day, this is like early 90s, people were like, why would I carry something around? What are you talking about? Like I want to carry something around with me all the time. I want to be in touch with people. So it was not an idea. That was something people did. And now, one of the lines that Mark wrote, he said, it'll have perceived value even when it's off. Like if you look at your phone, you perceive value of it. It's really interesting. The thing that we didn't anticipate, which I is now one of our greatest challenges, this idea that came in. I think it really started with much more social media and Facebook, was that all of a sudden we became the business model. Instead of the ideas of bits of, that advertising and little tiny, subscriptions and micropayments and all these ideas are there now, like please stare at your phone all day, right? That's terrible and destructive. So how do we, and also collecting all their data and not having respect for personal privacy. How is it that we're going to get to a point where, there's cameras everywhere, this world, I had the chance to work with Pope Leo a bit this fall. There was a big conference in November that fed into some of the advising for the encyclical that came out recently. This idea, it was called child dignity in the age of artificial intelligence. So I think, you know, the question, I'm off track from the question you asked about just how do you choose. I think that at this point, I've worked on a lot of different projects. And like I said, Journal Magic was about failing. And then eventually, 20 years later, it worked literally like our teammates, Andy, who had a parrot who's lovely, Andy Rubin, who loved robots. He went from General Magic to make something called Danger Research, which made a sidekick. It was a clickable phone that was mostly sold through T-Mobile. And then he got the idea for Android, Andy Droid Android. And so we ended up buying his company, Google, and working with him. So that was a good 20 years. And then Tony Fadell, who was our colleague, he came from Michigan and loved music and loved devices. And so we worked, and again, we were mentored by extraordinary people. If you do watch this movie, we're mentored by Steve Jobs' Mac team. And one of the teammates there, Wendell Sanders, who has had a chip in almost every product of Apple between him and his son, worked at a company called Fairchild. So again, this idea of apprentice journey mastery, we were young apprentices. These folks had been through learning a lot. We were able to learn from them. Even though we failed, it worked. And Tony was lucky to get a call from Steve Jobs 4 companies later and ended up this idea of an MP3 player, which became the iPod and the iPhone. I think the way that I choose now is really about, I have kind of a lot of surface area of investment in different kinds of people at this time. And it's less about me doing the projects, more about amazing people like all of you online doing things and how can I help, even if it's a short thing that we could do. So I think for you all, you want to do a combination of surface and deep. You do want to go deep and go deep on things you're interested in. And if you don't like working alone, go deep, be on the team, do it as a teammate. Um, I was lucky to work with a guy named Alan Kay, and he led something called Xerox Park. And he said, you should know things that you're not good at, not because you have to go learn them, but because you got to find people who love that stuff and they're your best teammates.
Do you want to explain it why people probably know Alan Kay but don't know Alan Kay?
You mean, well, I was lucky to work with him when I was at MIT and but he drew something like this. He did many different things, but one of them is he drew this idea of a Dynabook, which looks like an iPad, of this little boy and girl sitting under a tree, playing with this computation that could be anywhere. So that was one of his key insights. And then I got to know him because the ideas of technology and education as something that would be, there was a lot of people who worked on something called constructionist, which is that young people would play and invent, very Maria Montessori, very Lego. In fact, Lego was one of the teammates on this project. And in fact, some of the projects that came out of there are like Lego Mindstorm and some of what's becoming Lego Play that young people like in kindergarten, and in fact, the lab at MIT is called Lifelong Kindergarten, would not have a structure, but they would come in and explore, very Marie Montessori, to learn. And so Alan was very much part of that world and a great leader, and is a great leader in the computation world.
Yeah. One of the godfathers of modern UX.
Yep.
Uh, so Megan, I think a lot of people here interact with a platform that they know very well, YouTube. You knew Susan extremely well. You saw the whole journey of YouTube. I'm curious if you could share any stories about how the thinking behind YouTube became the YouTube that everybody here knows, or any wisdom around like that process.
Sure. Chad and Steve are the founders of YouTube, and they were a small company that started.
Incubated in our LinkedIn office, actually.
Yeah, they started, I don't know, they were gonna do, I forget what they're doing, but then it's just started to take off, this sharing of videos, and it just was growing, and people were loving this idea of two-way video, just like, let me send you a video, I'll get a video. And Susan Wojcicki is one of the early, we lost her to cancer. She was amazing, amazing person. She she was one of the first people that Larry and Sergey started to team with as they founded Google. They rented her garage as their first office. And she was an expert in many things. But Sergey, I remember at her services, was talking how important she was in talking to him. And he would say some crazy idea and she'd start to help him structure. And together they would think about how they were going to do that. So Susan had this real ability to synthesize what a lot of people were trying to say and help people begin. My colleague Puneet, we were writing an essay recently called "Endless Talent is the American Dream." It was for a U.S. audience, but "Endless Talent is the World Dream." One of the methods was sprinting and piloting and prototyping, and called "Begin as a Way to Begin," which is what we're doing this summer. And so she would figure out how to get people on the same page. We were working on something called Google Video. And if you think about Google, its original mission said all the world's information useful and accessible. Think of search itself, searching web pages, but then eventually scanning books and getting those to be discoverable, videos, other things. At the time, Google Video was more library-like. And Susan saw, I think one of the earliest videos was this knockoff of these two guys in China doing the Backstreet Boys, but they were in their dorm and they were like dancing, and their friend was doing his homework before, and it just went viral. And Susan's key insight was like, okay, that's how it's going to happen. And if you've studied chemistry, you know that if you want to get to a lower energy state, you have to put a little activation energy in, and then it's better. And I sometimes think in the world like chemistry that you don't know how something's going to happen, and then all of a sudden a little energy happens, and then it's the easier way that thing is going to manifest, if that makes sense. And so instead of hard work of collecting all the video, be very librarian like, which is an okay form. And we love our Library of Congress at all. Like we need that. But this was a different way, which was collective genius community oriented free for all, which just started, and we were lucky that that team, if you look at Google, about like I did a bunch of acquisitions, but half of the products actually came from amazing teammates who founded their company outside the company and then joined us and then built using the resources that we had. And about half of them were homegrown, like our friend Paul, who came up with the idea of Gmail, and then we called it dog fooding. So we made everyone use this way before it was easier to use version of Gmail, and then eventually got better, prototyping, and it worked.
Hmm. It's always interesting because I think in retrospect, some of the things that we were playing with, the things you're like, oh, I never expected that to become a big thing.
Right.
Even the idea of data science, when we came up with the title, that term, when Monica really kind of was like, well, why don't you just test out all the different job titles on LinkedIn and see what sticks? And we're like, huh, that's a good idea. We should do that. And then you do that, and you're like, I guess we're going to call ourselves data scientists, and this is what we do is data science. Who would
It's
have
it's
thought?
such a great word, because instead of, and also analyst was more the word, but data analyst has a very specific thing. Data science broad. You need to analyze. There's so many more pieces, so it's a broader word.
Right. And this is actually where I wanted to go is like, and we got a bunch of questions coming in, so we'll switch to those shortly. And so more people should, if you got questions, start putting them in there so you can collate them. The part that I want to ask you about is this notion of inclusivity. And part of this that I think we saw when the time that we served was you looked around the room outside the Oval Office during the daily stand-up and you go, wow, this looks like America. What
Yeah.
it didn't have was even as broad as it was, it didn't have what you would call TQ, the technology quotient, the people who actually really understood technology and how to help. You've done always a great job of finding ways to pull people in, especially if you look around the room and, like if you ever listen to some of those State of the Unions at that time and you go, wow, there's a lot more names that are mentioned here than the traditional names. That's actually because of Megan. Megan was the person who would go to the speechwriter and be like, hey, have you thought about these names? There's a Grace Hopper exhibit that was put up in the White House because of Megan. We wouldn't have computing without Grace Hopper.
Yeah, she invented the idea of coding languages, and everybody told her that was a dumb idea at the time. But she's like, I think we could broaden participation if we could like use a more Englishy language, like Java or Python
Totally.
or something, right?
So So we're in an era like I'm like people are starting to form teams. People are thinking about these things. What I think would be helpful, yeah, exactly. Like I think people would benefit from hearing from you because I learned this from you also. I thought I was good at this, and then I realized I wasn't good enough at this of being inclusive and pulling people. And this can be a loaded word these days, but what I
Mhm.
think people miss is what we really when we were working together was that no, you're increasing the odds of success
Yeah.
by doing this. And so I'd love for you to riff on how you think about this and why and how people can benefit from your approach to building these teams.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've worked on a lot, which is that friction actually generates energy and motion and power. So you want lots of different kinds of people. If you all think in one way, you're going to miss things. So having people from different disciplines, having people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, race, gender, LGBTQ, like all different parts of the world, different, just all different ways of thinking, that's very valuable. And it's not only valuable because I think it's like prove it. So any teams that are broader just they have higher profits, they have better products. So you want to be thinking about that, and you want to be doing a couple things. You want to be not only finding people, but also making sure that your team has belonging, that everybody's there. That one of my favorite things that Eric Schmidt used to do um, is he would kind of pause meetings and he'd just see if anyone else had anything to say, and he really encouraged people to speak up. So learning to pull out maybe a more introverted person and getting them, because people have something that they didn't say, and when they say it, you're like, oh my God, that's thank you for saying that. We needed that. So that's very, very helpful. Um, I think that I was going to show you a little bit. This is about a person named Ada Byron Lovelace. And Ada Lovelace was at the time of the first industrial age, so think Victorian like Darwin. And she worked on this. This is her teammate was making this mechanical computer. His name is Charles Babbage. And she basically said she's Lord Byron's poet math daughter. And she said in a letter, she said, I think we can figure out the math of the cerebrum, the way that, which is AI basically, the math of the cerebrum, if we think about it right, the way we figured out astronomy and sidereal, which means star math. And then she wrote, I wish to bequeath to the generations a calculus of the nervous system. And she went on, Babbage encouraged her because she has so many cool ideas. He's like, why don't you write a paper? She's like, not writing a paper. But then she ended up translating something about this device that was in Italian. It was a short paper. And he said, put in notes. So she put in these notes, and they're like way longer. And they're signed AAL, Ada Augusta Lovelace, just like J.K. Rowling. You couldn't use a woman's name at the time. It's the Victorian age. And she wrote the first algorithm ever. And she invented the idea of general programmability. And when we did the Google Doodle for her, we have this woman in her Victorian dress writing, and it goes all the way to like digital music because she said, we could do that. That's her examples are awesome. And so a lot of people don't think like the founder of AI is this woman from the Victorian time. And also interestingly, Byron, her was with Lord Byron was with Mary Shelley when Mary wrote Frankenstein. So, Mary Shelley is telling us, let's not have the AI from the movie 2001 that kills us. Let's have the AI from Star Trek, where the AI is helping Lieutenant Uhura translate, and it's helping Sulu to navigate, and it's
Well,
helping,
well, let's actually go to that real quick
yeah.
because Megan, you were essential. We had this whole thing about we wrote the first memo to the president about how computing was changing with the DeepMind result, and this was an AlphaGo result, and then that kicked off a process that was became the first U.S. national strategy on AI and automation, led by really Ed Felton. And
Uh-huh. And
so
Fair Alliance, they did that.
Kara and just an
Yeah.
incredible team.
Yeah.
Uh, how are you thinking about AI nowadays?
Yeah. I'll actually show you. Let's see if this will project. I'm thinking about a lot of things on AI.
I would have,
As you are too. I think everybody is. It's like this. Um, all right, did that come up? Uh, Sorry, I'm looking really fast. There it is.
I recognize a bunch of these.
Yeah, so this is me talking about I want the Star Trek, not the how one. But
Yeah.
this is the preparing for a future of AI, and it was a combination. And one of the things that I wanted to point out, the reason I brought this up is look at this list down here. These are open town halls that we ran. So we went to Seattle and we did legal and governance. Anyone could come. We hosted it at UW because the university is a great central place. We were in DC looking at social like applications people weren't always thinking about. So justice, other things. We did the police data initiative DJ together. Safety and control was with CMU, looking at in New York, NYU, looking at jobs pressures, et cetera. So all the themes that are live now, some Silicon Valley work around governance. So opening this up for this is a diversity point. The diversity of anyone who wanted to weigh in on this, we tried to open ourselves up to hear from them. The same idea as the State of the Union, right? And then on the right is a little more of a strategic plan for R&D. So we did that work. I just shared into the chat an interesting thing that came out of some of that work. And let's see if I'm going to kill this and look at this.
It's there.
You see it? Okay, so
Yep.
you guys can see that. So just to summarize on that, it is just graphic. These are two charts that our colleague Lauren created. And the reason I bring them up is because these are potential harms. So again, we want the good AI, not dangerous AI, and we're in the middle of that place. Like technology can go wrong. So what can we work on together to not have these harms, which are already here in society? People are, being weeded out from resumes. They're not getting loans. They're not getting this. They're getting discriminated against. How do we come to learn how to audit algorithms, to have recourse, those things? So these issues, both societal or individual, are very real and very serious. And at the time, people already had mitigation strategies. In fact, here, this is from 2017, I think. So we can cause these to be projects. And this is the list of the literature at the time. So you guys have that document. I'll bring another hero up. This is Ida B. Wells. She was noticing, she won the Pulitzer Prize about, I think, 7 years ago for work she did 100 years ago. So she's from the Gilded Age time, and she was in Mississippi and then in Memphis. People burned her. She's an amazing journalist. They burned down her newspaper, faced massive discrimination, ended up in Chicago. She's really the first data scientist at scale
Yep.
for justice. She started doing the data science work behind lynching and the assault on people. And her red record is the thing that won the Pulitzer Prize 100 years later. What she says, it's a data science word. The way to right or wrong is shine a light of the truth upon it. And so she brought that forward. So there's a lot of scary things that are happening with AI and AI slop and other problems. And can we team up to go scout for who already has nascent and interesting things that they're doing? Kathy O'Neill, we tried to recruit her to the White House, and she was busy writing her book, Weapons of Math Destruction, audits algorithms. She's always working with the lots of AGs, attorneys general, as they're bringing lawsuits for harms from algorithms. So becoming knowledgeable. I actually have her book right here. So either read this or what the TED Talks.
Megan always has these props around, just in
I'm a
case you're
mechanical
wondering.
engineer.
She always has this. This is like this is her jam. It's always remarkable. I was
Yeah,
like always like, wow, how does she have this just ready to go? She
just so
always
many
had it.
things that
Uh,
we might talk
so,
about.
so Megan, I want to get to a bunch of the questions here because I
Here.
think this is super important. So I'm just going to read a couple of them, and then, but they also theme over. So, one of this hi Megan, this is from Neha. I'm an introvert working to find my way into the intersection of education policy and cybersecurity. I love
Huh?
taking complex topics and making them click for kids. I think it's actually how we want to accelerate STEM potential in this country. I know Megan's going to change it to STEAM in a second, which I agree with, and I'll let her say more
And
about
Steve,
it.
you can say both. Just say them
But
both.
both. So we can say STEM and STEAM, fair. And my research keeps pointing to underfunding as a root constraint in education. If that's true, what's the first thing you'd like to fix or unlock real progress given the limited dollars? And if you will, what should be a positive deviance while I start to explore and solve this problem? I'll just add into the thing is like helping people understand like not only what they could do here, but what does positive deviance look like for a problem like this potentially?
Yeah, so I'm so happy for what you're working on, and those are really cool intersections. Um, I'm going to add it in a general way, sort of how I could answer. I'm going to share a couple examples, but my headline is the more hands-on. I once went to this amazing exhibit. A bunch of our colleague Nancy Weiss is at the Institute of Museum and Library Services within the White House, this amazing agency that supports all the libraries and the museums. And so people were getting awards, and we were in San Jose at I think it's the Kids Museum there, Children's Museum, or some cool museum. And somebody had made a cybersecurity exhibit for elementary school, and it had like these locks and things, and just all this physical way to understand what was digitally happening, which I thought was really insightful and helpful because I actually think a lot of people would come into tech fluency if it was presented in a way that we said everyone could do this, and we tried different ways. So I would encourage you to look around for different kinds of curriculum people have made for different age groups and look especially for stuff and then test, what pulls in kids a lot. I'm working on a project right now with some amazing people in New Orleans. That's a Raspberry Pi. It's just a board, right? So it's like if I put my phone, it's just if I ripped it open and there was a board with, chips, and you can see USB and some connectors to get to the screen, power, etc. So that's a little computer, costs about maybe $35. So this is a Pico, or this is a little for purple air sensor, it does air particulates. There's a little sensor for environmental air quality. You can lay this little board on top of here. And pretty soon I have a little sensor for the air that I could put out. Some people who work on Internet of Things made this little simple board where you can put, that's a Pi. A Pico is a little microcontroller. So you could do temperature or some music or whatever you want to do. This allows you to not have to wire everything. I'm showing you this because high school kids in New Orleans are tapping into the Purple Air network. If you type Purple Air map, you'll see that there's these kinds of bigger sort of form of the sensor. It's about $300. Are out and about, and you can tap into them and get the air quality. But what if we could make super cheap air quality sensors in high school to learn about electronics. And then we could go measure our air quality all around. And so we could share that with other people. And so for learning, that's allowed in Louisiana. And so these young people, the high school apprentices, are inventing and working with scientists to get different kinds of cheap sensors. Like I'm talking about trying to find something that costs, a couple parts might be, less than $30 to make the thing, maybe 50. And then you could just have this. So that's an example. Maybe there's something in cybersecurity that's like this. And could we do this in second grade? Because we would teach cooking in second grade. We would teach, they can read enough. So that, like we have a list of ingredients and we would put it together into some kind of a cake, but maybe we put it together into an air quality sensor. And in fact, what I learned is in this particular topic, not only did we have this work with Operation Spark, which is our teammates down there, with Shift 7, which is our company, which just means and, but we found globe.gov, which was started by actually Vice President Gore in the 90s, which is hundreds of teachers all over the world doing air, water, soil, and bio measurements and feeding them into NOAA and NASA. So that's a cool curriculum. In the chat, I'm going to put Trouble and Co., which is an amazing group that does GIS mapping. So you could do storytelling, for example, of the air quality or anything you wanted and historic and do sort of a scrolly blog. That particular one, if you click on the program, you'll be able to see things that students built in 3 weeks to data storytell. So if you want a data storytell, you can maybe use some ArcGIS or other kinds of mapping to storytell on a map.
Hey,
So
Megan, as you're going through this,
yeah,
let's layer in a question from Ben also, which is just because we only have 10 minutes left.
sure.
But what is, I'd love you to layer in, his question is it better to learn more from a group where you feel out of your depth and less knowledgeable than everybody else in the project? Or is it better that you learn more by being in a group where people are more at your level and you're working on something new learning besides that? So parity versus out of your depth.
The hard
I think I
answer
know
is
the answer to what you're going to
it's
say.
both. It's both. It's both, right? Because if you go with where you're out of your depth, then people are not jerks. I was really lucky, you guys. I took acoustics from Professor Bose, like the speaker guy. And one of the things he did tell us is like if people are being jerks, you could go somewhere else. And there's not jerks. So number one headline is like if people are acting badly, try to change them or let them know maybe they just weren't aware of it and they could improve themselves, and that's actually a gift to them. But if they can't figure it out, then find a different team. So we were lucky, like I said, got to work at General Magic, and we were super out of our depth. But they had been younger also before. Everyone's been younger. Everyone's been less experienced. Or it's not really an age thing. Everyone's
I was
been
going to
less
say every
experienced.
startup is out of its depth. Every
Yeah, out
nonprofit
of depth.
starts as out of its depth. Every government person starts out of their depth. That's why you train.
So do not be afraid of that.
Yeah.
Like get in there. And again, if people are being jerks, there's a different group to work with and go find them. And one of the things you can do if you're in a bit of out of your depth land is there might be a couple people who are in learning mode. You guys can team up. And that gives you a peer group. So for example, when we were at General Magic, since we've talked a lot about that one, a lot of us were younger. So we all were always hanging out and having each other. We could go ask each other first, and then we could go ask them more senior people and save time for them. Does that make sense? So you could kind of do a little bit of a mix. I do really encourage people, if you don't have a thing that you're obsessed with, go join something or go add yourself as a
Right.
feature to something else
Let's
because
let's
that'll
layer
give
in
you
Grace's.
a chance.
Okay. Let's layer in Grace's question, which is also for me personally, I know what I'm passionate about and what problems I'm interested in solving, but sometimes I get overwhelmed by all the things I need to do to complete my project and begin to lose momentum. What's your advice for following through with the challenging project? Grace, this is me.
Yeah,
10
it's so
out of 10.
hard. Actually, somebody just said they had an ornithology professor named Dr. Bird. So there's actually a book called Bird by Bird. And it's about, I don't know why it's Bird by Bird, it's an amazing author. But it's this idea, oh my God, I'm blanking on her name. She's an incredible author. And so she's talking about being a writer and how you have like you're staring at a blank page and how do you just get started or find practices to go. Some people use different systems. If you make a list, if you're a list person, I think
I'm
that's
a list
there. Yeah,
guy.
there you go, list. I think using some kind of process where you can kind of look on one page a bit comprehensively. In fact, our colleague who was chief of staff for the science advisor, Dr. Holdren, who was the director of Office of Science Technology Policy, where we worked, just amazing leader. Kristen Norgalo would always, every Sunday night, she had one list and she would actually hand copy it over. And the reason she was doing that is she was kind of putting in her head, she had this big book with all the papers that be drafted from this whole team of 100 something people and all the inputs. And she would just recopy her one page like a dashboard. And you don't have to do it physically, you could do it digitally, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. By the way, this is why we have the PSP model that we have for you every day, writing down your progress, your struggles, and your plan. Is
Yeah,
this a
love
way
that.
to create accountability? And the other way to have it, like even when we started Hack Your Summer, I knew I wouldn't be able to follow through unless I posted about it. And then once you post about it, you're kind of committed because the community's like, good idea.
Yeah,
And
let's
then
go.
then what you do is you put a team together. And so I have
Yeah.
Kathy, Genevieve, I've got, we got Michelle, we've got other people, Ariana, others, and we got all these mentors. And then now because of that, you have a team and you don't want to be the person that shows up in the morning and is like, I didn't do my stuff. So like you create these structures.
Yeah.
Um,
And if you
there's
couldn't do all your stuff, at least do a little bit of it. Get started and ask for help.
right.
One other thing I would add is just, um, when you're working with a broad team, or when you're working on something and you have a big list, to DJ's point, if you start a little but go get more teammates, that's also a way to work on the list, right? Because
Yeah,
some people would rather take parts of that and do that themselves, and then you don't have to do that, and they love that.
right. That all of those things. Well,
Annie
so
Lamott, thank you, Kieran, for the
yeah,
amazing
Annie
offer.
Lamont. The other, so I want to go to this one here from uh, Evelina. I'm not sure I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. You'll have to let me know how to say that, pronounce that properly. My apologies. What do you think recruiters are looking for at Google in applicants? As an applicant, how do I stand out from other competitive applicants? And what do you think will happen to manual coding in the future? We will start to use AI tools or a majority of the code and just test code. There's a lot in there, but maybe just give us kind of like, what do you think employers are looking for, and how do people think about, how do you give advice for what skills are going to be durable?
And we could probably both answer a little bit of this. And I'm not going to predict on coding. I think we sort of are seeing where it's going, but people seem highly involved still. But we will see. Um, I think people look for someone who has put their energy in, and you can see something they've made or done or led. And it might be in your classes that you just go deep and you make this extraordinary project. And so you may want to make a portfolio type space so you can show some of your work. Um, and it depends what they're looking for. If they're looking for somebody to more run a team and that, then the person who's been organizing, uh, whether they're organizing a team, organizing parties, organize this, get this an event. If they're looking for somebody for a specific skill, if you can demonstrate that skill in specific ways, yeah, this it's kind of willing to stick with it is I think a big important one for everybody.
Yeah, let's get through, see if we can crank through a couple more of these. I know you, this is from Nina. I know you briefly mentioned the number of times you failed, but can you touch on more specifically how you went through the rougher patches? What are some of the more noticeable things that helped you reach a turning point? And when did you give yourself grace and reality a check that you needed to change your process? I would call that lunch oftentimes for me. Like I failed a few times by lunchtime, but Megan, how do you think about it?
Yeah, it's iterating, right? But iterating is failing and then figuring out something new and then failing and figuring out something new. So you have to just I think the main thing that I do is I try to have something that we can look at, talk about, do, whether it's a one-page description, a quick drawing, I don't know, a photograph of something, uh, throw some Legos together, whatever the thing is, so that there's something, instead of talking to each other about something, we can look at something together and say, no, no, not this. But this leads us to something. So I think that is a very useful process. And not, my friend Dan always, he's a data scientist who does these amazing graphical, he has a company
Dan
called
Hammer.
Dan Hammer. He was at NASA, he released a bunch of the APIs. So Ode is like an epic poem. He does these, like all, he created Global Forest Watch so you could see all the trees. I mean, amazing. And so they're always looking at geo overlays for finding plastics, getting rid of that. So he says, what can I do in a few weeks versus years? Or what can I do in a few hours? Or what can I make quickly to prototype? And I think that's a pretty important thing for that. For me, I think you have to, yeah, I think you need to give yourself grace. And you also need to be aware that that you don't you have to pay attention. Like you have to get feedback. You have to hear if something's not working, it's okay to stop. Like things can have their life cycle. One of the things that when the General Magic movie opens is, was General Magic a failure? I don't know. Were the people a failure? No. Like, so yes, maybe what we were trying to do and what happened, but it like, it's an iteration.
Mhm. Megan, in just say 90 seconds, can you tell us how to balance both the unbelievable power of these technologies and also making sure they do right by us? They don't have the harms. And then also from Charlie and then also from Arthi of like how do you size a problem to figure out the right steps you need to take?
Just backwards, I'll say sizing a problem, you got to break it into steps and find a way to do something to begin to approach it, I think.
Don't write the
Uh,
book, write the chapter,
yeah, yeah, or write the outline.
right,
And
Alan?
then one of the cool things my ex-partner Kara does is she's written a couple books and they even use a wall. She'll put on index cards really quickly, like different themes and different like a character that this needs to be in it, this story, this thing. And then they'll kind of put a structure of an outline up and then start to put it's a very physical way of thinking about a linear story, but in a volume errant way. Um, so that's pretty useful. I just posted a link on the National Academy of Engineering, which was started by President Lincoln. So DJ and I are part of a tradition. By the way, one of my lines is government is whoever shows up, and that's all it is. So I encourage every one of you
Wait a second.
to
I,
please, okay, maybe he's got something on.
I
Please,
didn't, you think
yay! Thanks for showing up.
I,
That's awesome.
I
So,
did not plan that, but just in case you didn't think I brought my props.
yeah, awesome. So government is showing up. So I was just weirdly in Boston. I was near Bunker Fort, and that's where President Washington started technology in government, which is the Army Corps of Engineers, Corps of Eng. So every president has added tech. President Obama was adding the U.S. CTO and the U.S. Digital Service and data scientists and all these teams. Anyway, this National Academy of Engineering was started by President Lincoln, and it's to advise government. And there's a quarterly publication. This particular one, and it's more of a PDF type format, so just hang with it. But it shares a bunch of methods for solving things. And so it has scout and scale in it, and it's a method and some examples. So for begin as a way to begin, building communities of practice, storytelling and data storytelling, um, cross fluency with networks. And so just some of the headlines of what might be a useful summary kind of little piece there. And then one more thing I'll post to you guys is when we were in the CTO team, the archives hold that stuff. And so this was our page, and there's really a bucket of stuff around policy solutions, a bucket stuff I call capacity build the government, make government work better. And then the third stuff is how do you directly help the American people help each other? And that's what the third bucket is.
Megan, thank you for being here. I mean, most importantly, thank you for everything you've done for the country and the world. I mean, we could go on and be that we haven't even talked about the international stuff you've done, Bletchley Park, other stuff. But thank you for even sharing your wisdom here. You're our kickoff for this positive. I feel like we should have called it positive deviant instead of
It's
name.
like, we're not deviants, it's just deviating. But
Somebody's
it's like
project
the
is definitely going to
six,
be positive deviant,
yeah,
like or positive
have
deviant.
solution,
Like that that
some,
should be it.
something, look for what's already working and try to accelerate it versus
That's right.
I call
So
it admiring, admire a problem. That's enough. Now we got to solve it. But can I
totally.
headline one thing, DJ, which
Yeah.
is really quickly because I know we're out of time. I'm so proud of all the people who showed up. And just showing up is what you're doing, and that's being part. And if you do nothing else, that's awesome. And then you might also make a project. You might also do some other things. You might also, instead of making your own project, help three other projects, whatever it is you want to do. And remember that there's a lot of pressure on what's more important than other things, and it's just not real. So if something you care about manifesting in the world to the question about, I forget the name of the young person, but all the problems, we got a lot of problems. And so the only way to fix them is to fix them. And the only way to fix them is if a person fixes them, and that might be you, or you might see someone doing it and you might join that person. So go for it, whether you write a play, a song, create a tech thing, whatever it is, go, go, go. And thanks to the team for making this happen, especially DJ
Yeah.
Kathy.
Absolutely. You got a huge amount of thank yous in the webinar chat, and we will keep you posted on how this goes and the positive deviant that comes out of this. So thank you again, Megan. As always, awesome. And we are long overdue for more hangouts in general.
Cool. No team.
All
Thank
right,
you.
team, everyone,
Hey,
thank you.
everybody, have
And keep
a
us
fun
posted
time.
in the Discord channel how we can be helping you and sharing advice. Remember, use your pods. Anything else that I left out, Kathy?
No, that's
Genevieve?
it. It's amazing. It's great. So thank you so much, Megan. Really great.
All right,
So
guys.
much
And
quotable
tomorrow
greatness.
we have Michelle Carre coming, and she's going to talk about how to her path to chasing an Emmy and building 5 million followers and doing unbelievable stunts and all the other incredible. You're just going to be blown away by. I mean, she's just become a hero of mine, and I'm always like, you did what? So
Great.
that's going to be exciting tomorrow. So thank you all. Thanks, Megan.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.